I'll be reading Hindustan Times article written by Samiran Charaborty titled Fiscal Consolidation with a Reform Vision. Some budget are more about the nuance of the government accounts, and some bring an additional layer of policy intent to magnify the effect. The first budget of the National Democratic Alliance government in its third term falls the later category. It is not only addressed immediate economic priorities but also laid down a futuristic policy roadmap for the next 5 years. There are three threads running through the budget statement: continuation of the earlier policy framework of macro stability and supply side interventions, a demand side nudge towards the youth, a rural population, and the middle class, and an outline of the next generation of reforms to be ushered in. The harmonization of these three imparts a holistic perspective of the budget proposal. Another way to look at the budget would be the 6 key areas where it focuses on: agriculture, rural development, to nudge the rural demand and to contain food price volatility; government employment generation, particularly in formal sector with designed schemes; manufacturing with an emphasis on labor intensive; export oriented MSCs; infrastructure, energy, and urban development as a continuation of earlier trends. Bottom up, next generation reforms to improve the productivity of factors in collaboration with state government, and adherence to macro stability by committing to fiscal prudence. If we dwell deeper into these areas, we find that allocation of the agriculture and rural development has been increased to 4.13 lakh crore rupees in the financial year 2025 from 3.79 lakh crores in 2024 financial year, which is a 9% year on year. However, the budget refrains from higher cash handouts in rural areas and emphasizes improving the productivity and climate resilience of the agriculture. The objective is to both support sustainable growth, rural growth, and contain food inflation. The budget allocates 2 lakh crore rupees, which is 0.6% of GDP, to be spent on multiple new schemes of employment creation and skill development to help 41 million youth and foster further formalization of the labor market. This is a very comprehensive package involving the active role of the private sector and will run for the multiple years to supplement other job creation avenues through supporting MSMEs and different kinds of self-employment. For the financial year 2025, the budget allocates 10,000 crores for the three new employment-linked incentive schemes. Following the suggestion in the economic survey, the primary manufacturing push is forwards fostering MSMEs, particularly the labor-intensive ones, as they will buttress the employment creation goal. Improving credit access, easing working capital stress, and reducing the regulatory burden are expected to improve the investment in the purchase of machinery and equipments by MSMEs and steer the next capex cycle. The plan to set up 100 investment ready plug and play industrial parks would further aid in that direction. In fact, the many proposals to nudge demand would be also be an indirect boost to the manufacturing. Although the total capital expenditure at 11.1 lakh crores, which is 3.4% of GDP, remains unchanged from the interim budget, it represents a more than 15 YOY growth on the top of the average annual growth of 30% in the last 4 years. The sectoral dimension of the infra push might be diversifying a little with renewed focus on urban development, water, including irrigation and food management, housing and energy, rather than the traditional drivers of roads and railways. Energy transition is going to be priority area of the government, and infrastructure development in eastern part of the country would get a much needed flip. Over the first two terms, the government implemented several supply side structural reforms which helped the economy rebound strongly from the pandemic shocks. In the budget, the government had stated that it will formulate an economic policy framework to usher in the next generation of reforms to sustain this growth path. There is a plan to revive all the framework of direct taxes and custom duties and goods and service taxes to simplify and rationalize them to meet India's growth aspiration. The budget gets has also promised to bring out a financial sector vision and strategy document to set the agenda for the next 5 years. Improving the productivity of factors, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and the efficiency of the market would be the purpose for these reforms, which will be undertaken in collaboration with the state governments. The reforms are likely to have bottom-up approach to reduce the regularity bottlenecks and exploit the digital and technological powers developed by India. New growth avenues are expected to open up from these reforms. Despite the financing need for all these focus areas mentioned above, the government reduces the fiscal deficit target for financial year 2025 to 4.9% of the GDP from 5.1% in the interim budget. Higher dividends from the Reserve Bank of India provided the government additional physical space of 0.4% of GDP compared to the interim budget. The government has judicially divided this space into almost equal halves between reducing the deficit and embarking on some extra spendings. Its commitment to bring down the deficit to 4.5% next year, and then long-term guidance to follow fiscal deficit trajectory, which will keep the union government's debt as per the percentage of GDP on a decline path, will be a welcome signal for investors and rating agencies. A credible and conservative budget math has been a hallmark of this government, and the financial year 2025's budget is no exception. The modest nominal GDP growth projection at 10.5 leaves a scope for an upside surprise, and even the tax buoyancy estimate of around 1 is lower than the average of the last 3 years. On the other hand, the improvement in the quality of expenditure is quite prominent, as capital expenditure has moved up from 2.1 of the GDP in financial year 2021 to 3.4 of the GDP now, while the revenue expenditure has been brought down from 15.5% to 11.4% over the period. The internals of the deficit financing seems to suggest that the government has been conservative on its market borrowing estimate too. The announced fiscal path would trigger positive rating action and commentary and create the right preconditions at a time when India is embarking on its journey of inclusion in global bond indices.